The Guardian columnist Polly Toynbee and Jake Wallis-Simmons, who's a deputy editor of the Jewish Chronicle, Simons. Now, Polly Toynbee, whether it's the Queen's picture or what the English Cricket Board does about the tweets of a cricketer, are you inclined to wade into the culture wars?
No, the culture war is a total distraction. It's something of the government we're going to see increasingly from the government, because it's a way of not talking about substantial issues, things like levelling up. It's, early days yet, but I think we can see this ramped up. I mean, to find a handful of students taking down the Queen's picture, I mean, really, is that a news story? If students weren't rebellious, where would we all be? But if any little item that any eccentric person does anywhere can be ramped up into a leader column in the right-wing press, well, they'll do it. And of course, ministers are all jumping in on this. They really want to have a culture war. I don't think that the people in this country really want to see a government driven to try and divide people even more than we're already divided.
Jake, what do you reckon? You getting hot under the collar about any of this stuff?
Well, I think Polly makes a fair point in saying that students since the 60s have been radical, and they are by definition young and relatively immature and will do silly things, outrageous things to get attention. But I think that gestures like this should be seen as part of a bigger cultural movement and a cultural war in terms of a sort of Gramscian march through institutions that is taking place right now by what has been disparagingly called.
Right. I mean, is it by the government trying to sack people and appoint their own place people, or is it by students taking down a photograph? I mean, it's not really a one-sided cultural war, is it?
Well, I think the government has always sought to bolster its own supporters and its own base whenever it can. That's nothing new. But I think that what is new is that there is this culture war with a sort of woke ideology that's being promoted throughout our institutions, starting with universities and moving out through the civil service, through the arts, museums and so forth. And we see example after example, both overseas in the States and over here, of social unrest being brought about as a result of the pursuit of this sort of agenda. Even on the football pitch, we've seen this happening. And I think this is the thing that worries people very much and something which we need to stand against.
What do you think, Polly?
Well, I think we should be much more worried, as you were suggesting, Adam, about the extraordinary extent to which this government, far more than any other government ever before, is putting all its place people into every position of authority. It would now be out of the question for anybody to be able to apply for any job on a major national institution sitting on the board, let alone chairing it. Any major national institution in which a minister has any control. Just don't bother to apply, is the message has gone out, unless you are a Tory. If you have anything in your past, you've ever written for a left-wing publication such as The Guardian or The Statesman, I've come across a lot of cases of people who just said, sorry, that application's going nowhere. Of course, all governments do that a bit, but this is beyond anything. And the NHS is now about to be taken over entirely by the Secretary of State under the new legislation, who will have authority over every single trust board and chair, every single integrated care system. We are going to see an extraordinary amount of Tory place people put into every job of influence. And really that hasn't happened before. I mean, there were one or two cases, but nothing like on this scale. I mean, Labour used to make sure there always were some Tories on things. This time, this government is making sure there are no Labour people, no Liberal Democrat people.
And what would you say, Jake, to Marina Hyde, who basically says, we've got people like Nigel Farage and Lawrence Fox and also the Culture Secretary wading in and commenting on sporting matters. They're not people who are known, frankly, as being big fans of football or indeed cricket. Wouldn't it just be better if they shut up and let the players get on with it?
Well, I think that, first of all, I really don't recognise Polly's impression of Britain as being infested with Tory stooges in all the positions of authority. I mean, if you take just the sector of education alone, I think it'd be difficult to find any Tory in any university, in any significant position of power, let alone schools. But going on to football and the politicisation of football and the way that politicians, including now Nigel Farage, who isn't really a politician, wading in with statements on things, I think that what we need to look at is the fact that politics has come into football, and that's why politicians are being provoked to get involved with commenting on it. I mean, the fact that Black Lives Matter has made such inroads into the game, such as we've seen players taking the knee before major international tournaments, that's a political statement. Now, politics has no place in football. You're not supposed to be able to display flags.
Well, hang on, wait a minute. We have government-backed
as a player on the pitch, and if that's
Jake,
going
we
to
have
happen,
government-backed anti-racism campaigns in football. So racism clearly is an issue in football, and there are a lot of players from
I'm not
ethnic
saying
backgrounds.
that. I mean, I think, Adam, you put your finger on it, actually, because what we do have is, for example, Kick It Out, which is a proper functioning anti-racism initiative that works, that does its job, that all the fans and the players support. Black Lives Matter is political. And what I'm talking about is the introduction of politics into sport. And that is the root cause why politicians are then provoked to get involved with commenting about it. And the whole thing has no place in football. You're absolutely right about that.
Polly.
I'd just like to say that, all of these football teams have black players in them who are abused day after day, sent appalling racist abuse. Those teams wish to defend their players. And one way of doing this is to resist a small number of fans who are utterly racist. The ones who booed them for taking the knee, it wasn't because that taking the knee was over political. It's because they were making racist boos against black players. And it happens time and time again. And unless the whole team, white players and black players together, resist it and stand up against those people in the stands who are racist, what are we supposed to do? Are they supposed to just accept it? I think Marcus Rashford probably has more public support than the politicians who are trying to stir up some kind of culture war on this.
OK, thank you both very much indeed. Opposing views.